Hey guys, it's Brent with Lykins Motorsports, and I thought I would feature another engine that I built. This one was built several years ago, maybe around 2014, 2015, something like that. As you know, I really like the Cleveland engines and the Clever style engines, and I've been able to build quite a few that have just made outstanding horsepower. And this one was by no means no exception. This is a 460 cubic inch small block Ford using a Windsor block and Cleveland heads. So this is another Clever engine. Clever, Clevor, so kind of a combination between Windsor and Cleveland. I don't know who coined that term, but it seems to work well. But this was an engine that I built for Mr. Scott, and I think Scott is a subscriber of the channel, so he may pipe in later on the comments section. But this was almost a no expense spared type of build. I generally don't like to waste customers' money. I will pick and choose parts that will get the job done, and for safety and longevity and reliability standards. But I don't like putting someone into a $6,000 set of rods just for the sake of spending money. So this was one of those builds where we chose really nice parts to get the job done, and Scott wanted some lightweight stuff, so the entire engine, at least the major components, the block, the heads, the intake, all that stuff is aluminum. So we'll get going here on the build notes. And so for the build, we started out with a Dart aluminum block 9,500 deck height. These blocks are stupid expensive. I think at the time of this building, they were around $6,000. I'm not sure what they are right now. I don't do a lot of all aluminum small block Ford stuff, but they're not cheap. But they are very light. I think I'll probably be wrong on this, but I'm thinking maybe 100 pounds or less to snag one. This one ran through the gamut of all our machining processes, bored and honed with torque plates. They're standard 4125 bore, but this one is a 4155 bore. Deck height was squared up and set to 9490. The mains were align honed, and when we knock cam bearings in aluminum blocks, you have to really be careful with aluminum. So aluminum expands a lot. That's why on solid cams you will see the cold lash change to the hot lash by about 14 thousandths of an inch. So everything grows a whole lot bigger. This means that around the cam bearings, the material grows. So when we put cam bearings in, you either have to pin those bearings in so that they don't move, don't spin, or sometimes you can use like a green sleeve Loctite retaining compound and kind of set those cam bearings in the block. You also have to know that lifter bore clearances change since those bores are not sleeved, and the main housing bores change with heat, so you have to set your main bearing clearances on the low side of the spec. So this is a 2750 main bore, main journal size, Normally for an iron block, I would set the main bearing clearances somewhere at around 2.8, 3,000, something like that. On these all aluminum deals, I'm usually setting the main bearing clearances at around 2. So that's why they make all kinds of different sizes of bearings, so that you can dial in the sizes that you need for the specific application. As you notice, this block has a pipe plug to the left. You can see it to the left side of the passenger side deck there. You can feed these blocks with a dry sump, and you can put the oil in at opposite ends of the block if you need to. So lots of different little niceties and tricks for the aftermarket blocks. And this one, it was surely a nice block. We're using Scat Super Light 425 stroke crankshaft 2100 rod journals, using Cali's Compstar connecting rod 6 1/4 length, and custom diamond forged pistons with a 22.5 cc dish. They got a nice bowl dish, a spherical dish in there with one big fat valve relief for the intake valve. And we use some Total Seal 043, 043, 3mm ring pack sizes. There's a shot of the business end of the engine. Again, Dart aluminum block, screw-in freeze plugs, billet 4-bolt main caps on all 5 main caps. So that means that you have to use a special oil pan to clear those. Typically, I'd go to Moroso for that. There's some other brands that have popped up since then that can swallow those main caps up without issue. You can see the Scat crank and the Cali's rods. You can also see on the bottom side of that picture where I have the numbers written, you can see how much that we had to grind on the pan rail to get the rods to clear with that big stroke. You can also see, if you look up towards where the oil pump mounting boss is, you can see where I've blended in that that passage that goes from the oil pump to the block. You can also see right below it where we've had to grind into the block to let the rods clear. And I think let's see, I'm still thinking about this. So yeah, so that area around the oil pump boss and a little bit aft of that. So a lot of grinding to do on these blocks with the 4 1/4 stroke. Not as much as the World Products block though. Those blocks, since they have the extended length cylinder skirts, they take a tremendous amount of grinding. So billet main caps, Scat ultralight crank, so you can get a Scat standard weight, a light, and a super light. And with that longer stroke, it makes the cranks a little bit heavier, so we opted for the super light version. And then the Cali's Compstar connecting rods to go with it. Alright, not much to see here other than the Melling oil pump and the pickup that goes with that Moroso oil pan. You can see it in the background there. I've got it sitting on the floor. But there's another shot of the rotating assembly and a Cloy's billet double roller timing set, and it looks to be an ARP balancer bolt with a new timing cover. Another shot of the engine with an assembled short block. All the pistons are in there, although it looks like only number 1 is in there. Apparently the other 3 on that side have been are further down the bores. But like I said, new timing cover, an ATI harmonic balancer. ATI makes a really good harmonic balancer, but they require a good bit of work to make those fit. The balancer hub is separate from the outside part of the balancer, and it's not uncommon to have to hone those hubs to fit. Again, there's another shot of the Moroso front sump oil pan. This was going in an earlier Mustang, if I remember correctly, a '69 Mustang. It was either 69 or 70, but front sump application. And again, Moroso and a few others are the only ones that will make that pan to fit. And if you use an oil pan with a rear sump to clear those 4-bolt mains, sometimes you run into a pan where the outside, the front main cap or the rear main cap fasteners go through the oil pan, and you have to use some special pipe plugs to access those, so it can be a little bit tricky. There's a shot of the block with Felpro head gasket. Again, another shot of the oil pan. At the bottom, Moroso pan. Crowler solid roller lifters on this one. This one uses a solid roller camshaft. 50 thousandths durations were in the upper 260s and 270s. Lift was somewhere around 725, if I remember correctly. But ARP head studs on aluminum blocks, you always use studs. Bolts will pull on the threads differently, and you can cause a lot of damage with bolts. So anytime that you use aluminum heads, like on an FE, you use studs for the rocker arm mounting fasteners. Aluminum blocks use head studs and main studs and that sort of thing. It's a material difference. Alright, we're moving on to the good part, the cylinder heads. In my opinion, CHI makes the best aftermarket Cleveland head that I know of, and they come in all kinds of different flavors, including like a factory replacement 2-barrel head, a factory replacement 4-barrel heads. Both of those can use factory intake style or factory style intakes. The port sizes are pretty close to factory. And then you have the 3V. So the 3V is kind of a play on words between 2V and 4V. In the factory style Cleveland head, the 2V port was a little higher velocity, but it was a smaller port. The 4V port was a much bigger port with lower velocity but higher flow. So CHI figured that they would split the difference and come up with a port that had both high flow and high velocity, so they came out with a 3V port. There's all kinds of different port volumes that are available with these cylinder heads. 185, 208, 225, 260, and you can get into some of the ported, CNC ported heads that flow somewhere around 400 CFM. So for this engine, we went with the 225cc head, and the 208s are kind of hard to get. In all actuality, the 208 is a better head to start with, just because of the port layout, and the port sits a little bit higher than the 225. So when you CNC port these or hand port these, you can usually get to about 360 CFM, whereas the 208cc port will go on up. So these are the 225cc heads. You can see there that I've already began mapping out the valve spring install heights. Got them all dialed in there within several thousandths of each other. And on a lot of the Cleveland heads, you have to mix and match valve locks that I've found, plus 50 or a standard lock, just to get the install heights different. just because the valves are different lengths and everything plays into that. There's the intake valve. We used Ferrea titanium locks with a radius valve lock groove. They got a hardened tip, you can see there. Valve weighs 89.7 grams. So it's a 2190 head diameter with 11/32 stem diameter. There's the exhaust, again radius beadlock groove, 165 on the head diameter, 11/32 stem diameter, 68.1 grams. So fairly light stuff for what we can easily get our hands on. So we use some Manley valve springs on this build. Here you see me setting up the spring loads, checking everything, making sure it's all the way that it should be. About 270 pounds on the seat load. Then we check it at full open, and we got about 700 pounds on that one at a 150 open height. So if I remember correctly, these are Nex-Tech valve springs, and we also went to Manley for the other spring goodies, which includes spring locators, titanium valve spring retainers with a plus 100 install height, so we can get a little bit more lift out of that situation, and some comp cams valve locks. So here's a shot of setting up the rocker arms. As you know, I spend a tremendous amount of time setting up rocker arm geometry. It's very imperative that you just sit down and spend time with it. Time spent there gets you more lift at the valve and better longevity for your valve train parts. So on this particular build, we used just a rocker arm stud setup, guide plates, and rocker arm studs. I think I tried 2 different sets of rocker arms with this one. Usually the Comp Cams Ultra Gold rockers give a really nice pattern. The geometry is correct on those. You have to really be careful because lots of companies share the Cleveland rocker arms not only with big block Fords but with also big block Chevrolet. So there's a perfect little witness mark as we check the valve spring geometry with those rocker arms. We did try the Ultra Golds, and then we ended up using Comp Ultra XD rockers with a 1:7:3 ratio. So nice little, probably about a 50 thousandths pattern across the center of the valve stem. Again, it doesn't need to be perfectly centered. Anywhere near the center is fine. We're aiming for a very small pattern, which means that you're getting less sweep across the valve, which means that more of your motion of your rocker arm is being translated into opening the valve. We followed the valve train installation up with a Lunati stud girdle. So a rocker arm stud girdle keeps everything tied together at the top. If you have everything tied together at the bottom and the top too, then you have a pretty stable valve train. And since we were winging this thing to 7,000 or a little higher, we opted to run that stud girdle. You can see the CHI 3V intake manifold that had been ported, as well as the cylinder heads and an MSD distributor. Here's a shot of the front end of the engine using a Moroso electric water pump, and you can see the mandrel at the bottom there that we used for, we put a GZ Motorsports vacuum pump on this engine. Trick flow water crossover, you use a water crossover on these engines when you put Cleveland heads on a Windsor block. I'll show you here a picture of the bottom of the head in a second, but the bottom of the heads from CHI, since they're made for Cleveland engines, have the water transfer holes in the bottom. You have to plug those holes when you use those on a Windsor block, and when you plug those holes, you have to drill and tap the fronts of the heads so that you can reroute the water flow, and you can run it into that crossover that you see, which also feeds that water neck at the top. That's how you push water from the engine to the radiator and then back to the water pump. So there's the bottom side of the cylinder heads, those Ferrea titanium valves. That big red arrow is pointing towards the holes, the water transfer holes in the heads that have to be plugged. So you just use a brass cut plug and with a lot of sealant and plug those up. There's a semi-finished shot of the engine and Blue Thunder valve covers. It is so impossibly hard to get those valve covers anymore. Seems like Blue Thunder only makes valve covers once or so a year, and once they're gone, they're gone. But MSD distributor with the large cap, I like using the large caps. It keeps the spark scatter kind of tamed down a little bit. You can see that nipple in each side of the front of the cylinder heads that goes to the water crossover. There is the finished engine sitting on the dyno. We used a Super Sucker carb spacer and a Black Diamond Q1050 quick fuel carburetor. GZ Motorsports vacuum pump there that you can see, and pulling vacuum off of the valve cover. Blue Thunder, the holes in the top of the valve cover are screw in, so they include all these different kinds of caps. Some are blanked off, some have a PCV valve, some have a breather that you push in. On this particular one, I chose to get all blank caps, and then I just drilled and tapped one for a pipe fitting so that I could directly pull vacuum from the valve cover. So since this was built a long time ago, the dyno video is going to be less than adequate from what you're less than what you're normally used to seeing. I do have a video, so I'll show it to you, but it'll be somewhat less than optimal, but you'll still be able to hear the engine run. Alright, so engine sounded really good. We ended up making 720 horsepower at 6,700 RPM and 630 pound-feet of torque. So I've been saving the best news for the last. The compression ratio was low enough that this is a pump gas engine. So 720 horsepower on 93 octane, 11 1/4 to 1 compression, 630 pound-feet of torque. A testament to how good Cleveland heads are, and in combination with the right recipe of parts, just a really, really strong piece of machinery. So I hope you've enjoyed that. I've got a lot more builds to showcase, and I'll try to trickle those in over the weeks, just so that you can see different builds showcased all in one shot, listen to some dyno videos, that sort of thing. I hope you've enjoyed this one. Hope you're having a good week, and we're headed into a long weekend. Hope you enjoy that as well. Spend that with your family, and I'll catch you next week.